This is about the history of the Jewish people.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Our program will begin in just a moment.
Excellent.
Good day. Welcome to the second webinar in a 4-part series presented
Yes, it's a webinar, more than a panel or a conference.
By American Jewish Committee and Tablet Magazine titled 21st Century Europe and the Jews. Over these 4 programs, AJC and Tablet will explore timely issues related to Jewish life and the protection of democracies in Europe.
There we go.
Today's program will explore Poland.
Isn't this interesting? An interesting topic. It's very timely topic, as soon we will have a election in Poland to defend democracy. So this is a very timely topic.
And its unique relationship with historical memory. Joining us today to examine this and more are Deputy Director of the Museum of the Second World War in Dansk, Dr. Grzegorz Berendt, Historian of the Holocaust
Grzegorz Berendt.
in Eastern Europe at Tel Aviv University, Dr. Javi Dreyfus, Chief Curator of the Permanent Exhibition at the Polish Museum of the History of Polish Jews, Dr. Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimblett, and AJC Central Europe Director, Dr.
Wait, I have to hear that again.
Sebastian, Dr. Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimblett, and AJC at the Polish Museum University, Dr. Javi Dreyfus, Chief Curator of the Permanent Exhibition at the Polish Museum of the History of Polish Jews, Dr. Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimblett.
Oh, wow. This person is incredible. Barbara Kirschenblatt is incredible. Why do I know that this person is incredible? Because the permanent exhibition in the Polish Museum is simply breathtaking. I've shown just a little fraction of it in the video that I've uploaded called The City of Bones. But the whole exhibition walks you through the whole history of Jewish people in Poland, from the days when Jewish people entered the forests and heard the words from God saying, Pauline, rest here, to present day. So you walk through the whole history with reconstructions, with sounds, with huge boards, you even enter a reconstructed synagogue, and you even enter a reconstructed Jewish household. It's an incredible exhibition, and I have nothing but praise for the person that is the curator of this particular exhibition, which is permanent, and for good reason. It's an incredible exhibition.
And AJC Central Europe Acting Director, Dr. Sebastian Rajak. Moderating today's program is Dr. Antony Polonsky, Professor Emeritus of Holocaust Studies at Brandeis University. After we hear from our guests, time permitting, we will take your questions. You may submit your question through the Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll be joined later in today's program by AJC CEO David Harris, who will provide concluding remarks. Dr. Polonsky, the floor is yours.
So just to make it clear, there is a very high probability that we won't have any arguing or blood sports, quote unquote. It's probably just going to be a very intense stream of knowledge.
Well, thank you very much, Claire, for that very helpful introduction. In the year 2004, the historian Andrzej Paczkowski wrote, "One of the most significant phenomena in Poland the last 15 years has been the emergence, concretization, also in political life, of competing positions in the sphere of memory and in relation to the national past. This is even more the case today, and it applies not only to questions such as how is one to assess the decision to initiate an uprising in Warsaw in August 1944, or how is one to evaluate the roundtable discussion which led to the negotiated end of communism in Poland in 1989, but also to problems related to the Jewish past in Poland, and in particular, the response of Polish society to the mass murder of Polish Jews initiated and carried out by the German occupiers on Polish soil during the Second World War. The aim of this panel is to attempt to understand why this past has been so disputed in Poland, leading to a serious deterioration in Polish-Israeli and Polish-Jewish relations in recent months. The past cannot be changed.
This is from 1 year ago, but I can attempt to answer this question at least partially. Or that, well, to me, it's a major reason. The major reason, of course, is the policy by the current far-right, dare I say, fascistic government that indulges in a new type of Holocaust denialism. The new type of Holocaust denialism basically says that yes, it happened, it all happened, but none of the Polish people had ever anything to do with it. There were no collaborators, there were no people that took any part of it. And basically that's it. That is my answer. The main reason is the far-right Polish government in charge that tries to censor any talk about the Holocaust. It actually targets and attacks historians for talking about it. And this webinar is from 1 year ago. And we've had very big attacks on historians, publicized attacks on historians this year. Keep this in mind when we listen.
It can only be analyzed and understood. We may disagree about how it is to be interpreted, but our goal today should be to see how far we are able to find common ground. We have a distinguished panel whose members Claire Bailey has introduced. I've posed a series of questions which I've asked them to answer, and I hope this will lead to constructive dialogue. The first question is the question which is posed by this seminar as a whole. What is Polish history? How can it be best defined? Is it the history of the Polish nation, the history of the Polish state, or the history of the different ethnic and religious groups which lived on the Polish lands? I'll take the...
That is a very, very good question, actually. That is a very good question, and that is a thing that I actually often talk about. In my opinion, the history of Poland, quote unquote, is of course the history of all groups and ethnicities that have inhabited this territory, this geographical area. That to me feels like the best possible response, that yes, it is the history of all groups that have ever lived here. But let's see what the panelists will say. I'm actually interested in the answer.
Panelists in alphabetical order, and the first, of course, therefore, is Grzegorz Behrendt. Grzegorz.
Antony, this question is the most difficult among all questions you asked.
I'm afraid that Grzegor's audio is not the best. So we'll see. We'll see. Well, maybe. Oh, maybe there's subtitles. Okay, we will try to have subtitles.
Because it is difficult to say if it's a history of Polish people, history of Polish lands, history written on research in Poland.
I'm sorry, plants?
Because it is difficult to say if it's a history of Polish people, history of Polish lands.
Lands, Polish lands.
History written on research in Poland or by Poles or Polish historians all abroad. So frankly saying, I do not know a short and simple answer for your question.
Well, I already said my answer. My answer is that it's, of course, the history of all the peoples that have ever lived here. And that is also a bit bolstered by the fact that not only Polish historians have ever written about the history of these regions, Jewish historians have done so as well. That is an important thing to keep in mind.
The most the simplest one is that it is a history of Poland carried out in Poland, but it would be a wrong answer, because there is so many people occupied with Polish history all around the world. So, frankly saying, I do not know simple answer for your question. All these aspects I take into account.
That's fair.
Yes, thank you. I think all of the above is always a good answer. Javi Dreyfus, could you give your view?
I mean, that's fair, I guess, saying I don't know. Part of me is always afraid that I will hear a very nationalistic answer, you know? That is the answer that I usually dread the most in these sort of situations. But so far, from the first respondent, I am happy to say that does not seem to be the case. Let's see.
You on this question?
Thank you, Anthony. So as mentioned, I'm an historian of the Jewish people who specialize in Holocaust studies. So I will try to answer from the perspective of Jewish history. As I understand it, it is impossible to understand the history of the Jewish people, and in fact, the development of modern Europe, as well as fundamental human phenomena, without studying Polish history. At the end of the 19th century, close to 90% of the world...
Okay, that's a bold statement, okay? That's a pretty bold statement. But okay, I'm not gonna, you know, but that is a bold statement. That is a very strong statement. So I guess we do have some hot takes, I guess. I'm actually not personally sure if I would go quite that far, but
Jews lived in Eastern Europe, many of them in the Polish territories. In this fair grew movement that fundamentally changed the Jewish world, Hasidism, Jewish nationalism, Jewish socialism, and more. And in
actually, Hasidism was created before the 19th century and was created in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But yes, it is true that many aspects of the Jewish culture, many aspects of different Jewish, I'm going to use the word denominations, did arise in this particular part of the world.
In fact, they changed much above this Jewish world. So it is in this space that has produced unprecedented creative forces, as well as become the site of the darkest catastrophe of the Jewish people,
True.
The Holocaust. So if you want to understand today's Jewry, if you have a desire to learn more about modern Europe, if you wish to delve into human insight, go and study Polish Jewish history. I'm not sure you will find a concrete definition, but you will gain much more.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, as a person that is in depth studying Jewish history in Poland, I guess all I can do is agree. It's a pretty good statement.
Myself, if one speaks of one's own career, I started as a historian of Poland between the wars, and I moved from that to Polish-Jewish relations and the history of Jews in Poland. Barbara, can you give your answer?
Oh, this interests me. Muted. You're muted, Barbara.
You are muted.
Mm-hmm. From my point of view...
What a streamer thing. I guess it happens to everybody. Muted. This answer interests me very, very much from the person that is the custodian of the enormous exhibition in Polin. Oh, I'm really excited for this one.
This is a question that has to be answered because the answer becomes the basis for the creating of museums, for the creation of permanent exhibitions, for the writing of history. So I think that it can, on the one hand, be left as a kind of an open, abstract question that is unanswerable. But in fact, it's always being answered because it's the precondition for writing a history of Polish Jews or for exhibiting it or doing anything else with it. So the first thing is I would cite Jacob Gold, the famous statement that there is no history of Poland without a history of Polish Jews. There's no history of Polish Jews without a history of Poland, that they are inextricably linked. That would be the first thing. The second would be that there is more than one way to be Polish, and that history of Polish Jews demonstrates one of the ways of being Polish. The third point I would make is basically a conundrum which has come into focus, I would say, in the modern period, and that is Poland a nation state or is it a state of nations? And clearly, this was a very, very important issue. And
that is a very good question. Oh my God. I'm liking this panel. This panel is amazing.
It had huge political implications during the interwar years, during the Second Polish Republic. Before the death of Pilsudski, after the death of Pilsudski, and certainly in the post-war period, and certainly in our period today. And so it seems to me that one of the, I think, strengths of the core exhibition at Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews,
it's amazing,
is that its starting point is that that the history of Polish Jews is a way to recover the historical diversity of Poland, never better exemplified than during the period of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, when half the Jewish population of the world was actually living in the territory of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth.
True.
And that that is actually our starting point. And we see that as in stark contrast with the post-war period. And I would conclude simply by observing that Poland was once one of the most, that is to say, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was once one of the most diverse countries in Europe. Today is one of the most homogeneous. And that Poland was once home to the largest Jewish community in Europe and is today home to the smallest. And that would be my starting point.
Well, thank you again. That's very helpful. Sebastian, this was your question.
That was a really good starting statement. I'm going to write this question down. It's such a nice question that I expected good things from this person. Like, to be a custodian of that particular exhibition, you have to be good. You need to be good. I wrote down the question, is Poland a nation state or is it a state of nations? Very, very interesting things.
At least you pointed out to me its importance of asking it. What's your answer?
Thank you, Anthony. I'll start with the singular and I'll end with the plural. So from a bird's eye view, you may see this history as a history of a people, of a nation, of a territorial group, a group of great aspirations, a great potential, and that group is placed among two mighty neighbors. It defines, it predetermines the political reality of that group, and therefore it strives for survival, and therefore tends to see itself as a victim of oppression very often, and that experience of oppression and danger dominates its collective psyche so much that it fails to see that it also at times might have been oppressive towards others. So here you have this tension between being an object of oppression and acting in an oppressive way sometimes as well. And that oppression towards others, if not physically, then at least culturally or politically. And by the way, that does not only apply to relationships between Poles as a group on the one hand and other groups on the other, but also to, how should I put it, intra-Polish relations or relations between particular classes, social classes within society, let's say nobility versus peasants, the rural population in general. And then the myth of a hospitable, generous, heroic nation is just that. It's a myth that has to be confronted. And I will end with the plural as I promised. We should rather be talking about histories of Poland because of the ethnic and religious ingredients that you have and used to have in the past, and because of the many social layers that we can focus on.
Well, thank you. I think that these 4 responses give us a very useful framework to the whole discussion. Is there anything anybody would like to add before we move on to the next question?
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. I take your point, history versus histories, but not because there are separate groups with separate histories, but because there are different perspectives, different focus, different issues that might produce quite different, quote, histories. And one of the things at Polin Museum that we strove to do was to create an integrated history, an integral and integrated history, rather than to treat the history of Polish Jews as one of many histories of Poland.
I will say that if that was the goal, I would say it's a success, in my humble opinion.
And I think that that's a very, very productive and a very interesting approach to take. And it had huge implications for the way in which we actually thought about and approached the entire core exhibition.
Well, thank you. I think
I agree.
That's very helpful. Let me now move on to the second of my questions, which is, what in your opinion are the most important achievements in Polish historiography since the end of communism in 1989? And here I would just make 2 points. One, I studied in Poland in the 1960s, and the idea that there was no serious history being done then, of course, is not the case. But 1989 did mean the end of any real censorship over historical research, and it also led to a huge expansion of the...
We are seeing a comeback of certain censorship when it comes to history from the government currently. I have to add this little bit of...
areas which it was permissible to study. I remember the head of the seminar in modern history at the University of Warsaw, of which I was a part in 1965, Andrzej Garlicki, saying, a sensible man does not go beyond 1989, he should have said person, does not go beyond 1939. Whereas, of course, much of the research which has taken place since 1989 has been on the Second World War and on the period of the Polish People's Republic, because these archives were now, for the first time, open.
Right.
So I'll ask Grzegorz first to give his opinion.
Muted?
Grzegorz, you have to unmute.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'm on. So, in my opinion, the most important change happened after the collapse of communism is opening of all issues closed until the end of 1989. It is what Professor Poloński mentioned before. And we are now free in Poland to research everything. And first, people after the collapse of communism started to go deep into this issue that were omitted during the communist time. As Garlicki mentioned, don't touch the history after 1st of September 1939. So now we have no such limits, and everything is under research, and different perspectives are presented, different opinions. And what really changed it was an access to the close.
Yes, I have mentioned this, that there is a return. We are seeing a return to censoring and forbidding certain topics to be talked about in the new far-right government. We are seeing this now. Yes, correct.
Collections of documents and sources, and historians in Poland, not only in Poland, but also historians in.
But the level of freedom is still, it's not outright illegal right now, but the government is attacking historians that do it. Like it's a difference from it being illegal like before 1989, but even if it's not outright illegal, the far-right government is still attacking historians that do it, if that makes sense.
Interested in Polish history can carry out research all over the world, using this material. In my opinion, now after 30 years, we are much farther with everything that during the communist time, taking into account not only the question of the history of Jews in Poland, of Jewish Gentile relations during in Poland from the Middle Ages up to now. In my opinion, everything now in Poland is under research. It is the best chance and the best achievement, with a lot of sources of financing this research from the country and from abroad. And we are not able to, in Poland, it is my Polish perspective, when we are now able to travel to Ukraine, to Israel, to Germany, and to make research in local archive using local sources. Mm. So this wide perspective and all aspects under research, in my opinion, is the greatest achievement of Polish historiography. Or
he said wide, not white. Wide perspective, just so it's clear.
Of this Polish history done after 1989.
Well, thank you. Javi, can you give your answer?
Yes, unfortunately, I must admit I deeply disagree with the opinion that was just raised, and I can hardly say that these years can be captured as things that are being opened and that free research is being encouraged and that subjects are not omitted. And I will try to answer your question in a different way, which is actually quite easy. As an Israeli historian, and despite the impressive research done in Israel and the United States, I can say clearly that the most important studies written in the last 3 decades on the topic of the Holocaust of Polish Jews were written in Polish by Polish scholars. Those researchers, Professor Barbara Enkelnicki, Professor Jan Grabowski, Dr. Darik Lebionka, and many others, have in fact redefined Holocaust research time after time. Now, this is a true reason for Polish pride, or rather, I should say, it could have been a true reason for Polish pride. Right. Unfortunately, and we might and should expand on this later, those prominent scholars have been under governmental attacks for several years.
There we go.
Which causes...
That's true. That is very true, and I'm glad that it's being said on this panel. Correct. We've seen more intensified attacks this year because this webinar is from 1 year ago. So yeah.
Direct damage to the impressive achievement of the Polish Academy. So the only aspect I can agree with Professor Berendt is the fact that archives were opened, but I don't see any encouragement of different opinions. It's not even a question of opinions, but we have very thorough research done, which is under today governmental censorship and attacks, and that is the most biggest problem that I see today, and maybe we can elaborate about it later on.
I hope so.
Yes, certainly. This, of course, is also the topic of the next question, and we will obviously come back to it. It's central to our discussion.
I hope
but I'll ask Barbara to give her opinion now.
So I'll speak from the perspective of the history of Polish Jews, and again, from my experience at Polin Museum. And what I would say is a major achievement in Poland, but also abroad. In other words, I think broadly of Polish history, is a paradigm shift in the study of Polish Jews. And what is the paradigm shift? And that is that until the last 2 or 3 decades, the history of Polish Jews in Poland was not actually, from my point of view, a history of Polish Jews. It was a history of Polish-Jewish relations. And a history of Polish-Jewish relations was largely a history of anti-Semitism and to some degree assimilation. In other words, it was rather more about Poles than Jews. And it was rather more about Jews as objects on which others project their fantasies and fears. It was not a truly what I would consider to be a history of Polish Jews, which would be a history of basically Jews as agents in their own history and not as objects.
True.
And so one of the tasks of the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews was in fact to bring this paradigm shift to bear on the way in which we would present the history of Polish Jews. And that paradigm shift is really reflected in wonderful new research and also in Jewish studies programs in Wrocław and elsewhere. And I think that it's a tremendous achievement that scholars are now able to work with Jewish sources and not only in Polish archives, that they are able to work in Yiddish, they're able to work in Hebrew, that they're working internationally.
That's amazing.
They're collaborating with scholars in Israel, the United States, other parts of Europe. And so I see there being really significant achievements in this paradigm shift and what it means to study the history of Polish Jews.
Well, thank you. Again, I'm resisting the temptation to intervene because I don't want to abuse my function as moderator. So I'll ask Sebastian.
Too good. Oh, Anthony, you're just too good.
No, I'll ask Sebastian to give his reaction.
Thank you. I may have some issues with my sound. I
think I like Barbara the most from this whole webinar. Maybe I'm just very, very biased, but I just love the Polin Museum. So I think I'm a bit biased towards Barbara.
Getting messages that my internet the connection is not stable. I'll try. Just let me know if there's anything.
No, wrong. It sounds fine. It sounds fine.
Okay, so for me, the number one thing, it's a more general achievement, not only when we talk about Polish historiography, it's more general, but specifically reflected in Holocaust research. Number one would be Alltagsgeschichte, which is the history of everyday life. We have made a tremendous improvement in learning about how people actually live their lives, and that also holds true for everyday life during the war in the ghettos. There's a lot has been published, a lot is being published. That is also includes what we sometimes call her story, women's history or women's contribution to history. I think that is very important. Number two would be the history of the downtrodden. And again, Holocaust research is part of that, but it's more generally minorities. How minorities fared in Poland with Poles, among Poles. It also has to do with ethnic Poles who are the underclass. Number three, I will come back to what I mentioned initially, and that's the question of myth. the over the last 20, 30 years, historians, Polish historians, have been trying, and I am choosing my words carefully, have been trying with ups and downs to confront the myths, history as myths versus history as confrontation. Paul Tillich said, one of his book was titled The Courage to Be, and I would say the courage to be aware of all shades of gray when we talk about history, in particular in history of Poland specifically. So I think that has been a major achievement. It's definitely very difficult when we talk about the history of Polish Jews and Polish-Jewish relations and the Holocaust. And I understand there's always a tension between governmental, maybe not always, but it doesn't look unnatural. Every government, every political power has the ambition to, if not control, at least to moderate what historical debates.
No, I don't agree with this. I cannot agree with this. I simply cannot agree with this. The far-right government is outright attacking publicly historians that dare to speak up about certain aspects of the Holocaust. So this is no. To just try to wave it away and say, oh, all governments try to do it to some degree. No. No. That's a no from me. Okay, that's a red flag for me. For this sort of, for going down that kind of logic. Nope. There will be no agreement on this.
Are about and how they are run, and so I guess this tension will continue to exist.
The Holocaust bill is a little bit more complicated, I think, because I do agree that it is inaccurate to call, for example, the death camps the Polish death camps. You know. If we're talking about the same thing. I do agree that it does introduce a very misleading language to say. But yeah, there are aspects to this topic.
But it's a major achievement of Polish historians trying to overcome that tension.
Well, thank you very much. I think
that the attacks are unwarranted, and it's more than just populist attacks. It's trying to sue the TV station that featured a person saying a thing, for example. That happened this year.
That I'm not going to ask people to comment on what's been said so far, because the next question does raise...
That's absolutely true. Blaming the Polish people is extremely nebulous, correct? Yeah.
Most of the issues...
It's part of the denialism, actually. It's part of the genocide denialism.
Talking about. I'll just make a couple of points before I pose the question. First is, coming from South Africa, I'm very well aware of the difficulty of overcoming a divisive and painful past and the difficulties which this creates. So I do understand how difficult it is to do this in the Polish context. I would say, secondly, and I would agree with Barbara, that the real progress which has been made in the understanding of the history of Jews on the Polish lands is in the establishment of Jewish life, the nature of Jewish religious civilization on the Polish lands, the development of movements for integration, all aspects of Polish Jewish past up to the Second World War. The Second World War is the crux and the most difficult problem. It reminds me of the joke about the man who was going to Dublin and he asked somebody on the way, how do I get to Dublin? And the
Okay, I will pause for a second. What do you mean by the Holocaust continuing in Poland after the Allies won? I actually have to ask that. I'll be awaiting a response in the chat, and in the meantime, I'm unpausing. Because the situation in Poland after after the Allies have won, was complicated enough that I actually need an answer to the question, what do you mean by that?
The answer was, if I were going to Dublin, I wouldn't start from here. And so this is a very serious problem. And this comes back, and this is the last point that I'll make here, to a point that was made by Andrzej Nowak in the debate about Jan Gross's book, Sąsiedzi, Neighbors. You'll remember that Andrzej Nowak had an article where he posed the question, Jedwabne or Westerplatte? And I think that we need a history which is both about Jedwabne and about Westerplatte, a history which both looks at the dark past, the difficult past, those aspects of the nation's history which cause pain and shame, and Westerplatte, those aspects of the nation's history about which one is justly proud. And obviously, in the case of Poland, as in every country, there are both sides, and we need to find a way to synthesize them. So
there we go. It's true that the Polish government have refused Jewish claims to property lost during World War II. Yes, that's correct. That is correct because actually my family has such a case that is in the limbo. So yes, I personally know that the government has refused the claims to property. Yes. My family's case has been in the limbo for many years, let's just say. The anti-Jewish massacres by nationalist militias. Well, I would have to ask you about what do you mean by national militias, because that was there were no several national militias in Poland after World War II. The mob pogroms, yes. But keep in mind, and we have to be very precise here, mobs doing pogroms is not the same as the Holocaust continuing after the Allies won, because the Holocaust is something that is state mandated. It is not a bunch of groups doing pogroms. There is a very big distinction. The Holocaust was a state-mandated, organized, industrialized even machine. It wasn't just a bunch of... It wasn't a bunch of groups doing pogroms.
So let me now move on to the third question, which is, I suppose, the central question of what we're looking at today. What are the problems which have occurred in interpreting the past, above all in the area of Polish Jewish?
That's true. The state under which Poland fell under the USSR did its own. True. Absolutely correct. That's such a huge topic that we would need to dedicate its own stream to it, to be quite honest. That's a big topic. Like how the fate of Jewish people after World War II in Poland, that is a big topic. We have touched upon it last time when I talked about the Bund a little bit. We have talked about it. So I encourage you to rewatch last stream and watch the Bund section. I'm hoping that after last time, all of you know what the Bund was, and in some countries still is, actually.
Jewish relations, and what role is played in this, as Sebastian pointed out, by the current government's historical policy. So I'll ask Grzegorz to comment on these questions.
So coming back for a minute to earlier questions, I was answering the general question, what in your opinion are the most important achievements of Polish choreography? So I mentioned I focus not on aspects of history of Polish Jews, in Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, or on Jew-Gentile relations.
Wait, that's interesting. I've never heard the term Polish-Ukrainian Commonwealth. I've never heard this term used before.
I gave on Jew-Gentile, or in Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth.
No, not Ukrainian. The person said Lithuanian, Polish-Lithuanian. Like the subtitles do not keep up.
In Polish Lithuanian
Yeah, it's Lithuanian. Like he didn't say Ukrainian. I would have been very surprised. Because I've never seen this name used anywhere, so I had to listen to it again.
Commonwealth, or on Jew-Gentile relations. So I gave a general question. In my opinion, what I said.
You see, the person whitewashing the Polish nationalist government's behavior is apparently a rep of a U.S. Israeli lobby organization. Sebastian Rejak, yes? Yeah, that adds up. His sympathies with fellow of the Justice Party. I mean, yeah, I have to say that of all the people, I like Barbara the most, and I like Sebastian the least. I have to say that. Barbara is hands down the best person on this webinar. It is Barbara's webinar, without a doubt, okay? Amazing, amazing custodian of an amazing exhibition. I will just keep singing praises for Barbara. And she looks nice as well. Good glasses, good black outfit.
Underline
very nice.
Second time. We are not in a free country. Quite often, I do not recognize my country, what I can read, what I can find in bookshops, in libraries, in newspapers, in scientific papers during conferences, in commentaries on our country. And as I want to stress that the freedom of research is a fact in Poland.
Also, to address Content Sniffer's question a little bit, because the answer is actually extremely interesting. The Polish government has refused Jewish claims to property, including my family's. But all governments do this, no matter what the political allegiance is. All Polish governments have refused to give the property back. And now I'm going to ask you, why do you think that is? The answer will surprise you. No, I didn't mean refused the Jewish people. I mean refuse to give up the pre-World War II property. Okay? Refuse to give back what Jewish people owned before the war. That is what I mean. And I'm not talking about all of Eastern Europe. I'm talking about Poland in particular. So we have to be clear on those two things. I'm not talking about the entirety of Eastern Europe. I'm talking about Poland. And I'm not talking about refusing Jewish people. I'm talking about refusing to give back confiscated property. So again, my question is, why do all of the Polish governments left-leaning, right-leaning, all of them refused to give back the property. All of them. No matter what Polish government is in charge, they refuse to give back the Jewish property. There is a reason for that. And it's not what you think. It is not. Believe it or not, the reason actually has nothing to do with Jewish people. Because they profited from it, given that since the large business interests have acquired it. No, that's actually not the case. The situation, because we're specifically talking about Warsaw here. The ownership status of Warsaw land is so complicated that it's a mess. It's not just that large business interests get this land. That actually is not what happens. But if the Polish government, any Polish government, would write into law that it would have to give back the property that it was confiscated from people, there is suddenly a huge problem. A huge problem. And it has nothing to do with Jewish people. This was actually explained to me by a Jewish historian that specializes in genocide. Well, it wasn't explained to me in general. It was explained to a room full of people. After the war, Poland received a lot of Western land that used to belong to Germany. And approximately a bit over 3 million German people were expelled from that land into Germany. Do you understand now where I'm going with this? If the Polish government were to give property back to Jewish people, it would be also, it also would need to give back property to the descendants of all the 3 million German people that were expelled after World War II. And this is something that no Polish government wants to do. It's not just Volksdeutscher, because, again, before the war, the borders of Poland were very different. It was bigger to the east, smaller to the west. After the war, Poland lost its eastern lands and have taken over a pretty big chunk of German lands, and German people were thrown out of those lands. You know? And if property were to be returned, it would also have to be returned to the expelled German people from those lands, which creates a huge legal problem for Poland. So there we go. That is a thing that I have learned fairly recently. Let's continue.
And all aspects of Polish history are being researched. So I do not agree that with the opinion that any aspect, any research is limited by anyone. All institutions, all universities in Poland, all scientific institutes takes money or receive only receive money from government. All these projects, programs are carried out because
Yeah, it doesn't have any. Yeah, that's right.
of money coming from the government, and it is
And I've learned this from a very prominent Jewish scholar.
going on since 30 years. Politicians change, but this situation is the same. The situation is the same. So please do not lose this point in your commentaries. We generally in Poland work because of a great state support coming from the very beginning with this spreading of focus of topics.
The state, the government has changed a lot since 1989, just so you know.
Issues under research since this 30 years. Nothing has changed. And now, the difficult points. In historiography, referring Polish-Jewish relations, or it's better to say Jewish-Gentile relations, because we are talking about Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, also with Ukrainians, Belarusians, with people belonging to Orthodox churches, not only to Roman Catholic Church. So, of course, what could be done and is being done.
The Tatars being ignored.
Research of all these tensions that happened in the past. And we know much more now than we used to know 30 years ago. And because of opening of new collections of documents, we learn much more also about the darkest period of the German occupation of the Second World War. What is also important, that in comparison with, for example, 1990s, we have now dozens of historians in Poland who can use Jewish language sources and to use this material, information, to present narrative about what was going on before the Holocaust and also during Holocaust. And we are now talking about what was the scale of collaboration with German occupation forces. What was the behavior? And for example, we can meet such a general opinions that Poles did so or so. But my point is, which Poles, what percentage of Poles or Gentile people, who is responsible, because there were referring only to the Polish people, Polish Gentile people, there were 20 million
I agree,
people.
Somniostatic.
About whom we are talking. Quite
Hello, Somniostatic. The best person in this panel is Barbara, in my
often
opinion.
we can meet a point with general.
I'm sensing some Polish pride being hurt from Grzegorz.
Statement that Poles or Polish society did this or that. And we quarrel to some extent about this aspect, the scale, the behavior. And it is one.
I know that Javi Dreyfus is probably going to disagree with all of what's being said now.
Point of a very, very vehement discussion.
What a long answer.
Now.
It's the longest answer, yeah.
My point is to point and to name perpetrators, not to use terms that are close to simplification and generalization. I am against this, as I am against any generalization. It was my point, and I think the most vehement discussions now are connected with what was going on in Poland during German occupation.
Can see some whitewashing of the government.
We can't hear.
Before I ask Kavi to respond, in the question, somebody asked what Westerplatte was. So I just should explain that was part of the port of Danzig, where Polish forces resisted the Germans in a very heroic manner at the beginning of the Second World War. Kavi.
Thank you, Anthony. So first of all, to Sebastian, fighting what is called the pedagogy of shame, the need to protect the so-called the good name of the Polish nation, and the desire to control, or as you said, moderate Holocaust memory are concepts unheard of in free democratic society, and certainly not in the world of academia.
Exactly. Yes. Very good. Oh my God. This is very good. This is a very good answer, because this person is trying to whitewash the government, Sebastian, and Grzegorz is trying to do it to a degree as well. So I guess the only people, apart from the moderator, I do like the moderator. We're rooting for the women in this. Javi and Barbara, they are great. They are nailing it. Grzegorz is serving government official. Okay, that explains a lot. Okay, that in my mind, okay. I see. Thank you.
When historians are put to trial, when journalists are being called to the police, when the last episode was a movie about Ziegler.
And I'm gonna be honest, this is from 1 year ago. The attacks on historians have only ramped up since then.
We cannot talk about free research, and those are things that should be noted. Now, regarding your question, Anthony, I will say that the main problem, and I guess I won't surprise anybody saying it now, the main problem causing ongoing damage is the direct government involvement in academia and the current Polish state's attempt to shape a distorted historical narrative.
Yes.
Poland is not responsible for the Holocaust, despite the fact that it is on its location where many atrocities were held. Nazi Germany performed the Holocaust, there is no question. But Nazi Germany received considerable assistance in the persecution and murder of the Jews across all of Europe, Poland included. Now, on the one hand, the Polish government promotes research and commemoration of Jewish life prior to the Second World War, as Professor Berendt had said, or those who were murdered by the Germans. And this is important. Yet at the same time, it works to block any discussion of cases where Poles were involved in the persecution and the murder of the Jews.
This is so correct that I don't even know what to add here. There's nothing to add here. Let me check this person. Director of the Museum of Second World War. Okay. What are his politics? I want to see. IPN is a very nationalistic institution. There you go. Appointed by peace. There you go. So he is related to the government. He's been appointed by a peace politician. That's right. As always, women are the brave ones and the men are the establishment cocks. True. My guy.
And sadly, such cases were not rare and are well documented. Many records and research indicate that although Poland fought heroically against Nazi Germany, not only in Westerplatte, but in many other places, many Poles were willing to assist the occupier in one aspect of its policy, the extermination of the Jews.
That's right. That's right. It's undeniable. To deny it is to deny reality itself. Oh, this person is nailing it.
True, most Polish Jews were murdered by Nazi Germany, but recent research shows that hundreds of thousands lost their life due to direct or indirect Polish involvement.
We're gonna hear some of those stories. I'm gonna upload some of these stories that were told during one of the marches that I took part in. We're gonna hear those stories directly, and those stories, of course, include the involvement of Polish people that blackmailed Jewish people.
Now, the governmental attempts to distort history are multiple, and I will point out only two phenomena. First of all, expanding and emphasizing...
Oh yes, this is a panel of experts. Just so you know, this is a panel of experts. I do not agree with all of them because some of them are very politically motivated, but this is a panel of experts.
Cases of Poles who assist Jews, those people who are considered as righteous among the nation. And I will just remind us that most of those noble Poles were forced to hide their courageous actions for fear of revenge attack by their own Polish surroundings. The second phenomena is reducing cases of collaboration. Claims that those who betrayed, reported, or murdered the Jews came from the margin of the society are baseless. Jews were betrayed by underground members, but by those who will become later cursed soldiers, by intelligentsia and rural Poles, and not only by the margin of the society. Largely speaking,
the cursed soldiers are already being raised by the government to some holy status when they raided villages and murdered people. Oh my God, thank you. Thank you for saying all this.
According to the documentation we have today and the research we have today, many more Poles were involved in persecuting the Jews than assisting them. Now, attributing the courageous actions of the righteous among the nation...
I will make a future stream about the cursed soldiers because that is a topic that my grandfather sat me down and we actually really went through the topic of the cursed soldiers in a very interesting way. So I will do a whole segment about it. We just have to schedule it.
To the whole Polish nation, while omitting the much more prevalent acts in which Poles blackmailed, persecuted, enforced upon, and murdered Jews is Holocaust distortion. And that is, in my opinion, the most dangerous problem we face today.
Agreed, 100%.
Well, these are...
I don't agree.
No, I understand. I
100% agree. 1,000,000% agree. There's no way to disagree with this. There's just no way. There's just no way to disagree with this. And I mean, there's no way to disagree with this and be honest as a historian. There's just no way.
Discuss this afterwards. I think that the point, two clearly defined positions have been set out. I'll ask Barbara to give her answer now.
Sure. So basically,
just so you know, because Somniostatic I think Somniostatic arrived not long ago. Barbara is so far my favorite person on this webinar. Barbara is the custodian of the permanent exhibition in Polin. And in the segment City of Bones, we have shown a small fraction of the permanent exhibition of Polin. Okay, let's continue. She has been amazing so far.
My starting point is what I understand as the government's historical policy. And it's been very clearly stated, which is to defend the good name of Poland. And in my understanding is that that has been has come to define the mandate of the Institute of National Remembrance, that the research.
Yes, and so-called IPN. That is the National Remembrance Institute. IPN. They did publish some good works, but there are some works that are.
The Institute for National Remembrance should follow the government's historical policy, which is to defend the good name of Poland. Well, that is not a starting point for solid historical scholarship.
Not, no.
Simply. So I would be really interested in hearing Professor Berendt respond to that, because it has profound implications for the research that is conducted at IPN, and it has profound implications for school curricula, profound implications for museums, for existing museums.
Yes, 100% yes. Yes. I actually received books from IPN, and some of them are good. Like the collection of sources about the Holodomor, that actually, I believe, came from the IPN, but I might be wrong.
The Museum of the Second World War, where I understand that you are now the acting director. It has profound, and I think that the transformations of that museum are in line with state historical policy. And it has been subject to great, I would say, debate, discussion, controversy. It has profound implications also for the creating of new museums, and more of them that are consistent with, quote, defending the good name of Poland. Now, I am completely in agreement
Correct.
with Javi that a great source of pride is in a country's willingness and ability to confront not only what they are rightfully proud of, but also what they are deeply ashamed of.
Yes.
And I'm reminded
Yes.
of a statement by Dariusz Stola, who said that we today, you, me, most of people living in Poland today are not personally responsible for what people before us did, but we are responsible for what we do with that knowledge. That's our
Yes.
responsibility. And
Oh my God. Yes. This is. Yes. My goodness. I've told you, Barbara is extremely good. Barbara is the best. Just. My goodness. So good. Thank you. Thank you, Obsessive Forge. Oh yeah, it only has like 756 views. So this is like, I think I want to do more of these sort of events, more of these sort of panels, because, well, nobody watches them. Nobody watches these events. Of course, I'm gonna link it at the end of the segment, but I want this channel to be a space where we can watch this sort of thing together and analyze it, you know, because this is really valuable. This is not just spicy panel where people argue about stuff. It's like, it's people, like, as you've noticed, people here are really credentialed. So I think this is very valuable, and I think we should do more of this sort of thing. I was worried that there would not be a positive reception, but I think it's gonna be okay. I think we can do a lot more stuff like that. I just hope there will be more in English. There are some in Polish. This is a slightly higher caliber of discourse than we usually get from our standard crab streamer. True. Or just do it anyway. True, Somniostatic. The real courage is to fear the fear and do it anyway. That's true. We all like to watch Wick, founder and like Nazi testicle, but this has a substance and very few eyes on it. True. Okay, let's continue. This is actually a very short one as well. It's what a duck would do. That's right.
To, in a way, to find a way.
Listen, during a WIC panel, I play Warcraft. During this webinar, I turned the game window off, okay? I turned the game window off and I'm not playing anything. I'm actually paying attention 100% to this. During some drama panel, I usually just play a game while watching, so, you know. I think it's, when watching this, it's worth paying attention.
And I would say a Polish way, a way that's specific to Poland, not a German way, a Polish way to deal with shame in a period where the government policy is all about pride, I think is an enormous challenge for the academy and for cultural institutions. And so I would really be interested in the, what others have to say about this.
Can I answer?
I will do my best. I will do my very best to somehow, by some miracle, get a conversation with Barbara. I will do my best, okay? I will try my darnest to get a conversation with Barbara.
Sure. Can I comment?
Yes, please.
So first, please, I would be very obliged for mentioning the names of historians of the Institute of National Remembrance occupied with the history of Holocaust, who wrote untrue about the situation in Poland. Please do not general. Please call the names of several historians from the Institute who write something according to the knowledge, to the sources about what was going on during the German occupation of Poland, and the focusing on this, on the issue of Jewish, Gentile, Jewish, Polish relations during this horrible time. So I do not know any historians working in the Institute, in the IPN, who ignored
EPAN, the organization. Also, the distinction between Sebastian and Grzegorz and Javi and Barbara is that they talk as historians and people, and I'm afraid I have to say Grzegorz and Sebastian talk like politicians primarily.
Knowledge, information from
I'm afraid that
sources.
is my...
Because we know the same sources in Poland, all carrying out research on this. We know the same sources, and we use them in a way we were taught during our academical studies. And to point the IPN as an institution sharing untruth about the war, about the attitude of Gentile population toward...
Spoiler alert. It's true. It's true to the point that during the conference, one much harsher historian than Javi or Barbara said that the government is outright raising a group of neo-historians that spread lies about the Holocaust. The historian during the conference about the mistakes of the Holocaust was much harsher than Javi and Barbara. Much Let me tell you this. That historian that was in the conference is so outspoken against the government that the young nationalist groups actually storm his speeches to disrupt them. Again, nationalist youth groups storm his speeches to disrupt them. Just for a little bit of perspective on the whole.
Jewish people is not correct because I cannot find it in publication. You mentioned several persons suggesting that only they in Poland write truth about what was going on. It is not correct. We have hundreds of books, hundreds of papers and articles published in Poland all the time with all these aspects you mentioned touched in this book, not only by people from academia or people you mentioned, also by people working in the IPN or any institution. What the IPN awaits from all colleagues is to use sources in such a way that quotation...
I mean, I'm gonna be quite honest. This is righteous anger. Like, Javi has really good reasons to be mad. I mean, I'm pissed off by what I'm hearing here. I'm so used to this sort of speech that I'm becoming desensitized to it. Like, it's so predictable from government shills to act like this. This person is acting by the book. This is standard procedure for the shills of the far-right government in Poland. All right, let's go.
Are not changed. For example, if there is in a source, in a testimony, information, who was a perpetrator.
We will listen to some testimonies and some stories, by the way. I have them prepared. I just need to translate them. And I'm just going to say this. We will see how many Polish perpetrators will appear in those stories. The stories of the families during the Holocaust will speak for themselves, okay? They will speak for themselves.
Blue police,
I'm just gonna say that.
Germans, Jewish police, Jüdischer Ordnungsdienst, not to remove Germans and Jüdischer Ordnungsdienst and leaving only blue police. It is a point that now we are in the situation that quite often people trying to present the involvement of Polish people in the Holocaust falsificate sources. And I will never agree.
Falsificate sources, huh? Can you give us an example of that happening?
This because I were not taught during my studies to do some things like this. And such things happens now in order to present a strong thesis about Polish involvement in Holocaust.
The government shill is accusing people of actually lying and falsifying historical data to frame Polish people as cooperators. This, well, here we are.
I will never agree.
Here we are.
With such a point and this practice. Never.
Well, time is running out, and I think that we won't have time for the other questions. Grzegorz has made a very strong statement. I'll ask Sebastian to make a statement now as before we close, and then ask...
God, I have to say, Anthony is a very calm, very strong moderator, I have to say. Damn.
Barbara and Javi, but we really have
Like he takes
to
control.
finish at 10 to 5. So if you can just speak very quickly, Sebastian, Javi.
I'm not going to make a statement. I'm going to offer my perspective on things that have been touched. And to Javi, when I was talking about governments willing to control or have a say in how historical narratives are shaped, I did not say that's okay. I only said that it's to a degree that's natural, and that's, of course,
there is nothing that says more that you don't have an argument than when you retreat to things being natural.
Oh, Barry!
Thank you for the $25, fake Alec Cal Parker. Thank you for the $25. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are here indeed. But yes, when someone doesn't have an argument, they will retreat to it's just natural. Oh dear. Oh dear.
You can talk about differences and the intensity of that, but well, just look at friends in Canada. There are things friends.
Look at other countries. They do it too. Therefore, it's natural. That's such a weak argument. I hope I don't have to explain why this is such a weak argument. I think everybody in the audience understands why it's a weak argument.
Only recently.
We are all gigglers here. We all understand why this is such a weak thing to say.
A few decades ago, started to talk openly, including historians, about their World War II history. We are all witnessing how Canada is going through a very difficult process of coming to terms with their very recent and complicated history.
There's nothing natural about it.
So that I think it's unavoidable on the one hand, but that does not mean that historians have to.
Those people are apologists. No, but to some degree it's just natural. I don't know. It's just such a bad argument. That's so bad.
Have to admit that there is a dominant narrative that they have to conform to, and if the
what did he call natural? He said that the government interfering with historians and trying to censor them is natural. That is what he's saying. Because I'm not gonna mince words either. I'm you know, as a trans woman, I'm joining the women's team. Okay, I'm gonna say it. The person is saying that the government censoring historians is natural.
The question is, do we have scholarly freedom of research in Poland? I think
well, if the government is attacking historians for doing certain types of research, then clearly we don't, do we? Are you gonna say yes, we do? Just a few months ago, maybe even less than a few months ago, a historian has been attacked on public TV by the government for saying something that was not nice about Polish people during World War II. And the TV station that she said it on was sued by the government.
at least two levels on which you can offer an answer. The most fundamental level is you have basically free access to government resources to fund your research, regardless of the topic, more or less. Maybe simplifying it.
It's true. Trans women just want to join the women's team. I'm a team player. I'm just a follower, not a leader or something. Well, you did so. Snitching, censoring history is not only natural, but also instrumentally necessary as water is to life itself. to a fascist government. True. True. Oh my God. True.
A bit. But then the second level is when you publish your research. What's then? What's next? Are there any retortions? And here the picture is not really. You cannot paint the picture in rosy colors. We know, we're all aware of
We certainly can't. Not under this government. There is no painting things in rosy colors under the current Polish government. That is certainly true.
The 2018
no
law
rosy colors.
that does have some freezing effect on historians, specifically young ones who might want to take up difficult topics, but they wouldn't feel safe. That being said,
there is no that being said after this. If young historians are afraid of touching certain topics, that means you don't have freedom of research. I'm sorry. Why? There is no that being said after that. You cannot follow it up by that being said.
First case in Poland when a historian was brought to court was back in 2004, also based on the law of the so-called IPN law, which already at that time included, Javi, that.
Oh no. We're gonna hear, this is the age-old argument of it's not just the current fascist government did it. The government before us did it as well. That's the argument. And I hear it so much. Oh God. Oh.
Revision on Holocaust denial. And that professor was fired. I think he was found guilty, but the crime was described as of lesser gravity. He was fired from his university. That was the first case when historical debate was limited by a state institution, and that was a court.
Sebastian,
one more sentence, Anthony. I think we should try and keep...
The moderator has interfered. We'll see what the moderator says. I'm interested now.
Things in some kind of balance. So there is definitely
balance.
Definitely a tension between what Poland's government would love to see as official history, let's say, and what historians...
There should be no official history. What? There should be no two histories, official history and actual history. Are we for real? Official history and actual history separate? I don't remember the name of the Polish foreign minister. Official history. Jesus Christ, I just cannot.
Want to do and are doing. But if we generalize and if we say, because you happen to work for the Institute of National Remanagement...
Even Grzegorz is weirded out by this. Official history, come on. Come on, even Grzegorz seems uncomfortable with that one. Like, oh, maybe that's not a good thing to say. His face, I don't know. I feel like he is not liking what is being said about his institution that is producing official history. Oh God.
Remembrance, by definition, your research is worthless, or your research is part of government propaganda, then I would not subscribe to that view. Yeah.
You know, this is a very important discussion. I think that we all want to reach some degree of consensus. We all are committed to this research. We are trying to find common ground, but we don't have enough time, and we need
Dr.
more
Polonsky,
time.
please feel free to take a few more minutes just so we can round out our conversation.
Okay, well then I'll just ask Javi and to say.
They've been given more time. Like, this is interesting. They've been given more time by the organizers. That's true. You're right, Kidney.
Few words, and then Barbara to say a few words.
Okay, so first of all, regarding the EPN, and I think this is what Barbara was trying to say. The fact that the EPN its tasks were changed by law in the summer of 2018 mean that today the EPN is not only obligated to document what happened and things like that, but it is obligated to protect the good name of the Polish nation. And
true, which is the stupidest goal you can have if you want actual history, not official history. No, it's different. Don't worry, it's different. It's actually a different surname. This is Polonsky, and the person that you're thinking of is called Polański. So they're actually different surnames.
And this is what Barbara was saying. She can elaborate later on. The fact that an institute is forced to protect this good name already puts this institution in a very problematic place. Not to say when it's a governmental institute with such an impact. Second thing, regarding different aspects that are research and not research, I'll give just one example. Anti-Semitism.
I'm Polish. I know the Polish surnames.
Much was written in the recent year about general anti-Semitism and about Nazi anti-Semitism, but there are some unique characters of anti-Semitism in Poland, that of Dmowski school and other. Some ideas that were later by the ND and later members.
Shots were fired. The anti-Semitism of Dmowski school. Ooh, shots were fired now. Shots were fired with this one, but I love it. Dmowski, yeah. A very famous scumbag, to be quite honest. But very glorified in Polish historiography. Let me be bitter. Don't be bitter. It will make your mood worse.
Of the delegatura and underground and so on. So there are topics that we can see that are not research, or at least anyone who will try to research those topics will find himself in a difficult position regarding what the government will try to promote or stop. The last thing, I think that the most interesting question was the one that Anthony, Barbara, and Sebastian, you mentioned, and that is actually, what do democratic countries do with skeletons that they have? Now, each democratic country has its skeletons. And if you're not a democratic country, it's not a problem. You can do whatever you want. But there are different ways that those societies refer to it. You can say that we don't have any skeletons. You can say that those skeletons should be blamed for even being there. You can say that others did it, or many other things. The question is, the critical question, I think, is, as was said by Barbara before, it's not a question of guilt. It's not a question of shame. It's a question of, first of all, responsibility of what we are doing with that past. And today, although there are wonderful Polish researchers, one of their problems is that they have to act in a very problematic atmosphere. And we already see that young scholars in Poland are not working as they did in the past. And that is something that is very, very, very worrying.
Correct.
Barbara, just want to say,
I do not recognize my country in what you are talking about. I do not know the academia. I do not.
I am used to this sort of rhetoric. I am used to this sort of language from government shows. Okay? This is more than just a historical conversation right now, you are actually getting a glimpse, and ironically, you're getting a glimpse into how the government, the current government, phrases things. You're getting a glimpse at how the Polish government discusses things, the language that it uses. That is actually a very typical type of speaking for a Polish far-right politician. So you're getting actually a glimpse into the current Polish far-right politics apart from the historical discourse. Like, I hear this sort of thing daily almost from the far-right politicians.
Not know my students which can handle any difficult problem. I simply do not recognize Poland in what you are talking about, my country.
Well,
if
I guess you're just divorced from reality then, because I do recognize it. I do.
if I can respond, Grzegorz, Professor Berendt, I understand. I totally understand what you're saying, and that is to say that I know that you feel and you feel that your students feel that they can basically research anything and they have access to any sources that they want to get to, and I would agree. I don't disagree. So that's not the issue. The issue is that there is an historical policy, and it is to defend the good name of Poland. That is the historical policy, and it is shaping not only the academic world, but it doesn't mean that there aren't independent minds that are working against that policy. There are. Nobody's yet gone to jail because they didn't quote defend the name of Poland. We're not suggesting that for a moment.
But historians are being publicly attacked already, and the private TV that has hosted a historian that has said uncomfortable truths about World War II, the government has sued that TV station. So we are already Engel King is someone else. So we are already seeing the escalation of the attacks, just so you know. We are already seeing this Barbara Kirschenblatt. But yes, we are already seeing an escalation, because this was a year ago.
But it is providing the framework. It is providing a kind of a guide to what is expected, what is respected, and it is the history.
Yes, you're correct. Barbara Engelking, who actually happens to be an acquaintance of my mom's as well. But yes, correct. That's correct, Somiosterek.
That is the historical policy. Where I see it, now you may not see it so clearly in the academy, and that's great. But where I see it is in the cultural sector. I see it in education. I see it in museums. I see it in your museum. I see it also in the way in which Polin Museum has to navigate its own course in trying to deal with...
There was a very, very loud case of the Polin Museum being attacked by the government because of the Time exhibition that it did about Polish anti-Semitism after the war. The attack was very aggressive. So yeah, of course.
Difficult issues, whether it's the March 68 exhibition, whether any number of instances, because the concept of what a museum is, as we've heard from Minister Glinsky, is that people should leave feeling good and that there shouldn't be debate.
That's... No! We cannot have feel-good history. We have to have history. People can't leave feeling good. What? That's so bad. No.
But there should rather be a kind of consensus and that museums should not inspire the kind of debates that these difficult issues raise. So I understand it really more from the cultural sector, because I believe that museums play an extremely important role as a bridge between the academy and the public. A very, very, very important role. That's our role. And we have I would say, a responsibility to perform that role in a way that we think of as being intellectually independent and not governed by the state's historical policy to defend the good name of Poland, because we believe that the best way to defend the good name of Poland is to be historically honest, bold, and open to debate. That's the way. And I mean, you can perhaps comment from the perspective of your museum.
So, okay, and the debate is going on in Poland, and mentioning the most difficult, tragic aspects we touch now. These issues are so important that nobody will change the situation about discussing very important issues. So it is what
I just want to point to specific language, vague. I don't know. David Harris. I'm not sure who David Harris is. David Harris just arrived. A new person.
What is going on in Poland now? There is a kind of presentation of information and opinion, and other historians are coming and checking, is it okay? Are we to accept, to adopt it or not? And it is the situation in Poland now. Issues and information and opinions confirmed are...
Well, the whole thing is called, no, they're not, it's not an AGC fella. This whole thing is organized by the American Jewish Committee. So that this person is not really
accepted, that not confirmed or not accepted. It is what is going on. And coming to the...
This thing is organized by the AJC, the American Jewish Committee.
Of the Second World War. During the last 4 years, there were some information, 27 information points added to the permanent exhibitions. Added, not removed from the exhibition, from permanent exhibition. And,
excuse me, what about the final? What about the final film? What about the final film? What happened?
Yes,
you moved the final film. You replaced it with a patriotic one,
final film
and they were forced to reverse.
Was removed. Yes, and it was the decision of the former director.
Why?
Why? Well, because he didn't find it correct to put together the information about terrorism, Islamic terrorism, and on the second screen, the picture of John Paul II. So it was his right to make such a...
absolutely his right, no question.
This is a very important discussion.
Oh boy.
I'd like to, with great regret, I think we do need to bring it to a close. I'd like to thank all the 4 participants for expressing their views so openly and for listening to each other.
I think we all know who we stand here, right? I think we all know who we stand in this discussion.
I think that the first thing that we need to do is to listen. And I think that we do need to try and find a consensus. And the consensus is based on the need to understand this very painful and very difficult past. I'll stop there and I'll hand over to David Harris.
We perhaps need a second part of this discussion.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. The trouble is...
John Paul II was the Polish one. He was the child abuse enabler pope.
At 40 minutes, we were extended to 50. At 50 minutes, we were extended to an hour. This is only a start, but I think that we all need to work together because this is something which is crucial for the future of Poland, something to a country to which we are all devoted and whose happy future we all look to. But I'll hand over to David Harris, CEO of the AJC, to round up this evening's discussion.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Professor Polonsky, and thank you to our panel for an extraordinarily stimulating and challenging conversation.
It becomes stimulating at the end.
I originally had comments prepared to wrap this up, but I've now deleted those comments in the interest of the shortage of time. I simply want to say that I myself am not a scholar of this issue. I am, however, for the last 40 years, a practitioner in the field of relations between Poland and the Jewish people. And Sebastian, my AJC colleague, if there is a second opportunity, I'll be happy to share my own experiences. I will conclude only by saying this, as was said earlier, why does the American Jewish Committee continue to engage in these extraordinarily difficult issues, this kind of political and intellectual minefield that we've seen yet again? Because there is no Jewish history without Poland, and there is no Polish history without the Jewish people. And
I agree
40
with
years
that.
ago, I heard similar discussions and debates and differences. 40 years later, again, those differences are revealed. But as Professor Polonsky, as you said, we are in a way bound to continue this conversation in an effort to see where we can advance the conversation and not simply dig in order to paralyze the conversation. There are painful truths, there are competing narratives. We at AJC are prepared to continue. We're proud to partner with the Tablet magazine, and we thank all of the panelists for being so forthright in this discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you, David, and thank you to our esteemed guests and moderator for today's incredible conversation. And thank you to our global audience for tuning in today. Don't miss the next of our series on November 18th, titled, Is France Being Torn Apart? Register for this program and more at ajc.org/advocacy anywhere. Thank you again and goodbye.
So, if you have enjoyed this segment, if you really like and want more historical panels / webinars like this, then please like, subscribe, share. Please tell me in the comments what are your opinions on what you've just witnessed. And tell me in the comments if you want more of this sort of content. And with this, we finish this segment, and I'm going to go to the toilet.